can't give up now, Ryo.
Say your prayers, Ronin dogs!
Your mother wears army boots!
You'll need that sense of humor where you're going.
Hello everyone, so another collab is upon us, so I hope you guys have a stockpile of crystals and vouchers saved up for this one, unless you're just not that interested in pulling, because Lucretia is coming next month and that's also a pretty major character. Still, the upside to collabs is that they do not have any bond requirements, other than just runestoning them, so that's always a nice thing for people who are newer to the game, or maybe you don't have a very filled out barracks for some reason. This time I would say both the banner characters are at least good, and of course I don't think I need to explain that Kayura is absolutely crazy in PvP. But before we get into that, I guess I can talk a little bit about Toma, and while I'm not going to sugarcoat it, I think Toma kinda sucks. The biggest problem with Toma is that we already have one really strong archer that's also an SR. And Narm's factions just work so much better than Toma's for any sort of PvE application. Now to be fair, Toma does have a couple unique things going for him. He of course has his Ronin Warriors armor, which makes him really strong. For the 3 turns it's going to be active. But in PvE you generally favor consistent output, so generally speaking Narm is still going to be better. Even when you ignore the fact that Narm's factions are more convenient for PvE. Probably the most unique thing about Toma is the fact that he disables passives every time he attacks, including on AoEs. Now while this is of limited use in PvE, it can be decently strong in PvP. There's quite a few really strong passive effects that people rely on. But my biggest problem with this aspect of Toma is the fact that he only has one AoE and that's his 3C. The rest of his kit is all single target, so he can't really leverage this passive disable that well. I think it's a real shame because I think if they had given him just one more AoE in his kit somewhere, he might have at least had an interesting niche of some kind. But as is, I really don't see any reason to be using this guy over Narm. Plus, we know that SP Narm is coming in a couple months. So even the few handful of things I can think of Toma having better than Narm, like his base attack and his attack bonus being pretty nice, higher than Narm's, Narm's just going to compensate for that whenever she gets her SP class. Unless you're just some kind of hardcore strategic masters player, I just don't see any reason to be investing into Toma. I wish he was better, but I just don't see much going for this guy. So now let's talk about Ryo! I think his kit is pretty clear on what he's meant to do. He's a very strong tank buster, possibly the strongest one they've ever added to the game. But despite that, he did not see very much play at all on the Chinese server, and a lot of people wonder why. The most obvious reason is because of his low movement. Currently, the PvP setting for this game is just very aggressive, and Ryo with his 3 to 5 movement, depending on if he has his armor and if he has apex boots, just isn't going to cut it most of the time. Now, at least this guy does have one thing going for him for a slow push game, which is the fact that he gospels himself and you can't get rid of it. So at least on paper, he shouldn't be disrupted too badly by a debuff setup. However, with low movement units like this, you typically expect him to be very tanky to compensate for that. Bernhard, for example, needs no introduction, he's very tanky. Reen also has below average movement, and he is also known for being really tanky. Now on the physical side, Ryo can get pretty tanky, but of course the prerequisite to all this is that he needs to keep his armor up. Once you have his armor up, you are on a timer to get him over to your opponent as fast as possible before it wears off, because after that he loses his physical damage reduction, he loses his self-gospel, and he's going to be vulnerable to all the typical things that you might be scared of. Also, of course, note that his damage resistance is only for physical, which for the upcoming meta is actually pretty bad. 3 of the most prominent DPS, which is Tensei Jessica, Lucretia, and Kayura, are all magic damage. And the first 2 of those are almost certainly going to kill Ryo without any sort of problem. Kayura might have some trouble killing Ryo if he decides to equip his Empress personal guards, but it's still pretty rough that they decide to only give him physical damage resistance. He also has a couple revives at his disposal, but they only apply if he's attacking. So this is of course to save you from getting counterattack killed, or from getting thorns to death, but there are some problems with even that. If Ryo gets thorns and he survives with low HP, that means he's easy to pick off, and he didn't get to take advantage of his revive at all. Because of this, when you're equipping and enchanting for Ryo, you need to get a very specific balance of HP defense and magic defense for him, and of course you're probably prioritizing attack more than anything else. But because of his talent and how it revives him, it basically means you don't want his HP to be too high, otherwise he's not going to kill himself on thorns. But if you have it too low, then he's going to kill himself on thorns on the first attack of his 2 attacks, which is actually also bad, because that means you're not getting an entire attack out of him. And on the topic of equipment, that can be another problem for Ryo. If you go infantry class, some people decide to go with the classic Steel Guardian. You can of course use the new Unstoppable Night Sword, which is nice for him if you plan on attacking 100% life enemies all the time. And of course, As crazy as it might sound, you can actually use Crystal Dagger on this guy. Now his skill is pretty low, so basically if you go for that build, you are basically aiming only for him to kill tanks. He's not going to outskill a great deal of the DPSs in this game, but he should be able to outskill the majority of the tanks without any sort of problem, and certainly so if they don't have any skill invested. You can also use hammers if you want to switch him between his infantry and holy class as needed. Molitor can be nice because of the limited number of dispels in his kit, and of course Mimer's hammer can be good, but you do need to sacrifice something for him if you want him to get the boost from it. Now with all that being said, you might be wondering what his kill potential actually is, because that's really what it comes down to. I mean, that's basically his entire job. If you can't kill the tank, then you're kind of wasting your time. Now thankfully a number of tests have shown that he is capable of one-shotting the majority of the tanks in the game. I've even seen clips of him destroying both Hilda and Albedo even when they're activating certain shields. Now it should be noted that Rio is very reliant on his chance, more so than any other DPS in the game. Because think about it, he's attacking twice. Out of the 60 hits he's doing, 20 from his soldiers and then 40 from himself, that means more of the damage comes from Rio himself than from his soldiers compared to a typical hero. See, most heroes attack and they do 20 hits from themselves and 20 hits from the soldiers. And even though Rio does have a 40% mod on his soldiers' attack, the fact that his most important attacks involve him attacking twice means that his attack is very important. So you just want lots and lots of attack on this guy. But of course anyone would know, it's hard to get that level of enchants while also getting a decent amount of HP or defense on them. So it's pretty hard to get Rio to the point where he's both strong enough to be blowing up tanks, but also tanky enough that you don't have to be too scared of assassins. So because of that, quite a few people say that if you want to use Rio, you might as well just forget it. Give him Apex boots, don't worry too much about his bulk, and just let him try to reach the enemy tank as fast as possible. And that of course is an option, but I think that just goes to show just how difficult it can be to make Rio work compared to something more straightforward. Like our next character. I don't think there's anything left for me to say about Kayura that anybody who pays attention to PvP needs to hear anymore. What is there to say? She's a magic assassin, she has 6 move, she has anti-AoE in her talent, she has a bit of off-healing, and she has Gospel just in case you need that. Kayura just has a very complete kit, she fills several roles in a box, and picking her gives you so many options. Like I said, I don't think it's necessary for me to sing the praises of Kayura anymore, so why don't we talk about the few weaknesses she does have. First, even though she does have some off-healing potential, she is really not much of a healer and you shouldn't expect her to be one. Out of the skills you typically bring on her, only her 3C is going to be healing your party. And it's definitely a nice spot heal and dispel. But she is not Rachel, she's not going to be keeping your tank alive for multiple turns or anything like that. And of course, since Kayura is an aggressive character, a lot of times you're going to be using the skill even when you don't need healing. Now she does have some skills to make her a better off-healer, she does have Faith as a passive, she does have other healing attack skills like Redemption, and of course you can even put her in her Holy class and put a Gift of Eternal Life on her if you want her to get even better at the off-healing role. But generally speaking, people don't build her that way, and it's kind of a waste to build her that way. The second big weakness of Kayura you might have heard about is that she has no damage in her kit. She does have critical damage, but that functions differently from damage. So because of this, things that reduce her damage dealt, like Last Rites or the 100% HP techs on Holy and Mages, and pretty much any other type of damage reduction like Miracle, all of these can give her a hard time. She can sort of get around some of it by using Twilight Star, breaking those 100% HP effects, but some people actually started running Glory of the World helms on all their mages and stuff just so they can stop Kayura from killing them. Some people try to equip Pale Staff on her in an attempt to offset that, but that actually doesn't work. Pale Staff gives skill damage, which is also different from damage. So generally speaking, you want to avoid attacking stuff with high damage resistance when you're Kayura. And ultimately, a lot of this comes down to pick ban. You just gotta make sure to ban the stuff that you think Kayura is gonna have a hard time killing. But honestly, as long as you keep in mind Kayura's weaknesses and you start to learn which enemies she can kill and which ones she cannot, you're going to have one of the strongest characters in the meta for quite a while. I mean, there's a reason almost everybody was using her on the Chinese server. So let's review these 3Cs real quick. So first we have Lance's 3C. This thing is total f***ing garbage and I'm still mad about it. Not that I expected a 3C to be able to save Lance, but come on guys, really? The other 3C they added is Listell's, and I got 2 words for you. Auto Arena. This thing is a really nice first AoE to use, even against the typical cancer setups that people have been using on defense. Not only do you cause an undispellable heal reversal effect on everybody hit, which means Old Landius can suck it. But if you run into those people who decide to equip a Heart of Gaia on their juggler, you still have something to fall back on because you're gonna inflict Listell's talents on everybody. So they're still gonna get Curse of Wounding to death. And if somebody decided to put Mimer's Hammer on like all their units, the heal reversal is undispellable, so the Mimer's Hammer is just gonna keep hurting them. So bottom line, for Auto Arena, the only real way to beat this 3C is to have Heart of Gaia on most if not all the units on your defense. And if somebody goes to the trouble of doing that, then I guess they deserve that win, because that's some dedication to a cancer defense. I almost gotta respect people who do that. So stepping outside modes that people don't actually care about, this is a pretty good 3C overall, but it doesn't actually make Listell do anything significantly new from what she was doing before. She's still very much a stall punisher. She punishes anybody who plays lots of healers. She's decently tanky herself. You could use this in a magic defense Listell setup and do some damage with it. Give her a miracle staff and all that. I played around with it a little bit on the Chinese server and it works okay. But the biggest problem with Listell is still her movement. She's just a little bit too slow for how the meta works right now. She's still usable. She always has been. It's just that this 3C doesn't solve her most glaring issues. So as far as the exclusives go, I think both of them this time are okay, but nothing amazing. Claret's helps her a little bit by healing her up a little bit more reliably between the 2 hits compared to something like the Flower Bonnet. The enemy phase improvement on it, I don't really understand at all. I mean, Claret is not an enemy phase unit at all. It might help her survive a hit, which will allow her to run away, possibly. But personally, I find this to be a pretty throwaway effect. It is probably her best helm given the other things she can wear, but it's still kinda lame. Omega's is one of those things where it looks really good at first, but then you start thinking about it and then you realize it's actually not that useful. The problem, of course, is that you need to actually kill somebody for it to activate. And if that's the case, Omega probably already did his job. It helps you snowball victory, but I don't think that was really necessary if you were already using Omega. Generally speaking, when people use Omega lol, they have a specific plan in mind, and these extra boosts are nice, but really not necessary. It's definitely nice for PvE though. It allows him to use his skills more often, and that's always something you want. As far as content goes, I don't think we're getting a whole lot this month. We are getting the Ronin Warriors collab event, of course. It's just a standard points event, so just sit back and enjoy. We're also getting Auto Chess back again, because somebody out there likes it, I'm sure. Anyway, that's all I have for you guys today. I know this is a way shorter video than I usually do, but with these characters I feel like they've been pretty well discussed. And in fact, I also made a video with Kong this time as well, and you can check that out. I'll link it in the description. But next time we will definitely have something more interesting to talk about, because the anniversary celebration has begun on the Chinese server, and let's just say it's off to a bit of a rocky start, to put it mildly, but we'll talk about that maybe in a couple weeks. Until then, good luck on your polls, everybody. Hope you guys get all the Kayuras you want. I actually want Rio this time. I'm going to try to make Rio work, so maybe look forward to that. Anyway, see you guys later.